I am Daniel Lucas, and welcome to Book 101 Review. Book 101 is all about the books that I read for the last 40 years, and today I have my special guest. She is the author of the book is Candle in the Shadows, no other than Miss Margaret Mary O'Connor. Welcome to Book 101, Miss Margaret, and can you please introduce more about yourself?
Certainly, Daniel, but first, it's a real pleasure to be here. I'm the author of two books, Scandal in the Shadows, The Original Priest, Mother Mary, and Journey of a Celiac Soul, A Second Chance at Life. I'm also a podcast host of YourRadicalTruth.com. And the whole premise behind that podcast, which really fits in, melds in well with my book, is the idea of looking into the radical truth of the other side of an issue, which so often is completely missed. And the Scandal in the Shadows book is really focusing in on the issue, the current issue within our church today of woman priest. Should women be allowed to become priest? And basically, as far as this whole issue is concerned, there's one side to it. And of course, if you're a Catholic, that's the side that you know growing up through your, early years in this church, that if you were a woman in particular and you would ask a priest, were there ever any woman priest within our church's history? It was definitely, emphatically no. And from a very young age, my brother received as a birthday gift from my mother a cardboard replica of a church altar. And of course, Paul was so excited, he immediately began to assume the role as the priest. And myself and my twin sister, Pat, we were told to grab some chairs. We were the parishioners. So again, I was very small, but everything was going good until I stood up at some point and I said, Paul, I want to play the role of the priest. No, you're girls. You have to be a man to be a priest. So, wow. I mean, I learned at a very young age, gee, there's certainly a difference between what a little girl can do and, what a boy can do. And then it was probably, Daniel, about 3 weeks later, my mother was a church organist and she had like a weekly choir practice. So we happened to be at this one, and when it finished, she said, "Would you girls like to go down and stand on the altar behind the main altar?" Well, you have to remember back in the 1950s, you did not see a woman anywhere up around the church altar. So, of course, we were really excited. And my sister Pat had her chance, and I just about got situated, centered myself, and was like looking out and thinking, boy, this must be neat on the weekends when the church is packed. Because, of course, back then it was packed. And all of a sudden, there's this awful gruff voice. What are those girls doing up on the altar? They belong nowhere near that altar. And that was the Monsignor, who was my mother's boss. So I was getting nervous, and my mother really wasn't one to rock the boat. But she said to him, "Oh, you're right, Father, unless they're cleaning the altar," because that was the only time you were, as a girl, a woman allowed up on the altar. So luckily, he left the church. But it took away from just that moment of excitement, genuine excitement. And the more I think of it, we were little girls. I mean, it just sounds nothing like what Jesus would do. Would he be gruff with us? So there were these two incidents that I just mentioned that always sort of stayed with me, obviously, into my adulthood and beyond. So I asked my mother at some point, I said, "How did you have the nerve?" Because back then you knew you didn't question the Monsignor. "How did you have the gumption to speak up?" She said, "Well, no one was gonna treat my girls like that." So I thought that was pretty neat. But this whole idea of woman being priest was always with me. And I heard this further on as I got into my 20s, 30s, 40s. And finally, the curiosity just overtook me. And I decided, look, I'm going to try to find out, get an answer to this. And it wasn't until I actually started to read books that contained biblical research. And this is where you get to the meat of the issue because there's wonderful information. And one book in particular, John Vingegaard's The Ordination of Woman in the Catholic Church. He was a former UK priest, and now he has the Vingegaard's Institute. And it's a wonderful place to go to if you really want to get into church research regarding, the past history within the Catholic Church. And there was a Protestant minister, Gary Macy, The Hidden History of Woman's Ordination. And he was floored. He found that the first 1,200 years in the Christian history of our church, women were ordained. And just as much as he was floored, I was floored. And when you go on through this book, there's actually a little chapter on Mary, Mother of God. And I'm getting really excited now because I've never read any other books with, regarding Mary, Mother Mary, like this. And in there, he said she was called Mary Priest, Mary, Mother of God. Jesus's mother was a woman priest, and her title was the model for all priesthood in the Catholic Church. In other words, the priests were praying for her to intercede to God on their behalf, to help them in their priesthood. But I mean, when you think of this whole issue today of woman priest, and to think what Mary, Mother of God's title was, well, this information to me should be just so wonderfully refreshing, exciting. And it was. And then a few minutes later, I had this awful realization. My church has betrayed me. They've lied to me all these years. And I'll tell you, I wasn't a happy camper for a good month or so, but then I thought I have to get out of this awful feeling. But what hit me during that time was a thought in particular that it's wonderful. I know, and there's other women that know, but the majority of Catholic women, whether we're talking here in the United States, go over to Europe, go over into Ireland, the Philippines, go over into Africa. There's just millions of Catholics that have no idea, a realization of this factual truth. And I really find it amazing, Daniel, that the early century, the beginnings of our Christianity, as far as like the church went, keeping a history, this is the specific period that they will never acknowledge. And why is that so? This has been a centuries old omission. And I think it's time that this information comes out. Our church, literally today, there's just this hemorrhaging with the priest shortage. And the Catholic Church, way back in the 70s, they knew through their records, they could see the number of priests going in was starting to decline. They did nothing. They did nothing in the 80s, 90s, and we get into the 2000s, and they've come out with the communion service to replace the liturgy of the Eucharist when there's, the shortage of priests. But for the listeners, this is Yes, it's radical information, but it's a truth. And any woman that receives a call from God, this is our religious heritage too. Men down through the centuries have been priests, they've been bishops, they've been cardinals. No matter what your nationality is, say it was in an Irish family, Daniel might be a priest, another generation, Christopher might be a bishop, and still Liam might be a cardinal. This religious heritage was really looked upon as something so important. And okay, but over here on the right side, what about for us women in the church? We were baptized the same as the little baby boys were. We received the exact same anointing. And yet, when we get to that point that we are receiving a call from God, and our church is saying no. And to think of this information that is showing us that we are definitely equal. Why isn't our Catholic Church acknowledging what Jesus said in Genesis, what God said? In the divine image, God created them, male and female. God made them. We are equal. There should be no separation there. And this is such a part of one's spirituality within our church that if you get this special calling, you should be able to act on it. And I want to leave the listeners, let them know, especially the woman, there's a group called Roman Catholic Woman Priest. What happened back in 2002? This had to be quiet because otherwise, a bishop in Rome, he ordained women that wanted to become woman priest. And of course, if Rome knew, he would have been removed from the church. But there is what is known as apostolic succession. In other words, from the apostles down through the centuries, if you have like a real a priest, a bishop, they obviously can ordain men to be either priests, bishops. Well, it's the same thing now because these women were ordained as women priests by a regular Roman Catholic priest. They themselves have this apostolic succession. So those that were ordained women priests, some of them came back that wanted to be bishops. And once they were ordained as women priests, now in America, they can ordain women priests that want to become women bishops. And you see this line is continuing. And this group, it's not only in the US, it's all across Europe, different countries. So, what I'm trying to say is if you are a Catholic today, a Catholic woman, you receive a calling from God, the door isn't shut in your face. You can go through Roman Catholic woman priest. There are a number of other independent Catholic churches. In other words, these were groups that at one time were associated with the Roman Catholic Church. They believe that women should become priests, and as well that one person, like the Pope, shouldn't have all the power. And another group would be the Celtic Christian Church. And I happen to be Irish, so I
So, Miss Margaret, my question is how does the book explore the concept of Mary as the original priest?
well, what I do is I bring that to light, and it's like a dance that you're doing in the sense that you're presenting something which is just seen by the official Roman Catholic Church. What they did, Daniel, back in 2010 was the hierarchy of the Catholic Church likened any woman that wanted to be ordained likened that to the sin of pedophilia and how they could go so low when what is the sin of this woman? She's answering Jesus's call. Um, so I bring out the particulars about Mary Priest, and I relate that. I go back into the 1900s when there was Pope Leo the 13th. And at that time, Rome allowed this Pope to have an actual painting of Mary, Mother of God, to be hung up. So that was 1903. And then in 1913, we can see things are changing because now that no longer is allowed. And then we move forward to 1926, 1927. They completely took away Mary's title of the model for all priesthood. They took away any devotion to Mary Priest. And John Vinsgaards brought up the fact, well, why? What was going on during those particular years? Well, it just happened to be a coincidence that women from other church denominations as well were starting to bring up this issue that they themselves wanted to become women priests in their particular church denomination. And I don't know if they thought out of mind, out of sight, but I thought, how could they just take Jesus's mother's title away from her? And it's the way that they did this that really upset me. John Vinsgaards mentioned they had a real small article in one of the Roman periodicals, and some church official was thanking this newspaper man, and in so many words, isn't it proper the way you handled this question? And in so many words, this is something which the normal Catholics wouldn't understand. Well, certainly we wouldn't understand you taking away Mary's title, but they're referring to Mary as like an object, a question. This is Jesus's mother. That was just beyond me. And I think back in at that time, 1926, 27, both my own mother and grandmother, they were still alive. And of course, they never heard, this, any mention of this. But for something within our church, which is so important, any girl that goes to church, where is her role model? Well, yes, we see Mary there, but we never realized that Mary, Mother of God, was a woman priest. Mary Magdalene, the apostle to the apostles. But where did that go? And I want to bring up a really striking point. Back in the 1970s, I believe it was 1976, the Pope's own commission, Pontifical Biblical Commission, they ruled, they actually looked into the question of women being priests, and they emphatically said, there is no biblical reason why women can't be ordained. Well, hello, 1976, we're at 2024. This is the sort of non-movement by the hierarchy, because our hierarchy, church hierarchy, has never been held accountable. And what I'm trying to do, Daniel, is like a grassroots effort to bring this wonderful information out to the everyday Catholics, the laity, because I'm sure if they can understand that there was indeed this past history of women being priests, being deacons, being bishops, and then having Mary, Mother of God. Oh, she would be such a role model. And I have a petition in my um, book, or you can go online, yourradicaltruth.com, and look across down the menu, and you'll see the petition. And basically, I'm asking Pope Francis to bring back into our Catholic churches um, to have that picture of Mary, Mother of God, in priestly attire. Could I show you a picture of her? Is that allowed?
Yes, you
Okay.
may. But Miss Margaret, to sum up our discussion, yes, to sum up our discussion, Miss Margaret, what lessons can modern readers take away from Mary's story as presented in Scandal in the Shadows?
What they can take away is for themselves. I think the most important lesson is a woman's own spirituality. If you receive that call from Jesus, you have every right. You're doing nothing wrong. You're answering Jesus's own call. And it's time that the church officials understand that. And isn't it so sad that women have to go now to these other organizations, these other churches to answer Jesus's own call to them? This would bring such I'm calling it like a revival, just such new energy into our church if we had women up on the altar, obviously doing everything like the male priest does. And that's what Mary did. She was also known as the sacrificial priest, meaning she was there at the consecration of the Eucharist. And if we want our Catholic heritage to continue, first of all, we have to realize that women are indeed equal just through their own baptism. And then from that current ruling back in 1976, um, this is something that has to change. And the only way it's going to change is for the everyday Catholic to understand this radically wonderful other side of our Catholic Church's history of Mary, Mother of God. She was an everyday woman. It's important, of course, that we have her up on a pedestal, but we also have to realize that she ministered to other women. She was out on those roads just like the apostles, the male apostles were. And there were also other male apostles aside from Mary Magdala. There's the concept of apostleship, meaning that who were the apostles? They were anyone that was divinely sent out either by the risen one or by a particular church community. So we have to picture those roads were fulfilled with both not only male apostles, but female priests.
So, Miss Margaret, can you please invite our listeners to support Scandal in the Shadows?
Yes, I want you to remember you have a voice. You're allowed to speak out from Vatican II. And we need your call of action if anything is going to change. And yourradicaltruth.com, you can sign the petition if you find something there of interest. And this, in a way, is a call of action because you're supporting Mary, Mother of God.
Yes, people, let's support Miss Margaret Mary O'Connor because if you support her, let's empower women all over the world. So, Miss Margaret, thank you for your time.
Thank you very much, Daniel. It's been a pleasure.
Modicon people, see you soon. Thank you, Miss Margaret, for your time. I
Oh, thank you.
appreciate you. Thank you